Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Box. And it is a Monday, which means we are usually doing sort of a box barometer, kind of looking at what the current box situation is. Anybody that usually we kind of look at players who are putting their hands up. But today I want to talk about the thing that is going to save the box, the secret to us potentially winning the 2027 Rugby World Cup. And it's not necessarily a specific player, it's more like a group of players, and about how we're going to get them to the next World Cup and how this is going to help us potentially get through to the next World Cup and get all the way using the current squad we currently have, whilst bringing in other players. And basically, this channel is dedicated to breaking down the big book box conversations. So if you are new, please do subscribe and let me know what you think. The big secret for me to the next World Cup is Japan. And why do I say that? Because at the moment we are looking at a rugby calendar that is absolutely brutal and is breaking down a lot of players worldwide. It's not just a South African problem, more so a South African problem because we really don't align with any sort of global calendar. But the amount of rugby players are playing across the world is incredibly high, and probably the highest it has been ever. And the good news is that a lot of the South African players, for example, players who kind of maybe might have sort of question marks with regards to where they might make the next World Cup, are playing their rugby in Japan. The reason this is such a good thing, and it's interesting because this was previously viewed as something really negative. A lot of people looked at players playing in Japan, for example, and they said that the standard wasn't high enough, for example, and therefore, they weren't going to be battle hardened, for example, they weren't going to, ready to play at the highest level when they play test match rugby. However, when you look at the players that are playing in Japan and when they come back and play for the Box, they are actually generally the Box most consistent performers. I mean, if you look at it at the moment, it's the likes of Malcolm Marx, Franco Mostert, Kwagga Smith. Now Jasper Wiese is going to be playing in there. Faf de Klerk, Jesse Creel, Damien Delende, Kurtley Arnott, Cheslin Colby. Those are a lot of so the main players currently playing over in Japan. And they've all been very good recently. And I think it's amazing, how a few years ago, what we looked at Japan, for example, as a problem for our players is now becoming a bit of a saving grace. Jasper Wiese being almost the best possible example. He is a player that was playing, I think he played the most rugby minutes of any professional, I think it was last year. This year, he will play significantly less because he's made the move to Japan. First of all, their season is a lot shorter. Starts in December, finishes up in about May, which means that, June, the Japanese players had completely off. I think also the second week of June that finishes. And then I've got their complete October off, for example, and November, if they're not sick for the Box, they will also have off. So there's far more opportunities for these players to rest and be fresh. It is also a slightly less physical league, for example, than playing in the top 14, the Premiership or the URC. And I think it's a lot better on the body, which means these players are going to be able to last longer, for example, prolong their careers. And also, they pay really well. So I think Japan's actually becoming a really, really good outlet for South African players who are getting on in their careers, getting to sort of the senior parts of their careers, to be able to go there, keep up their fitness. None of the Japanese players come back, for example, and look like they're not fit and on top of the game. But also be able to sort of prolong their careers by playing in a league which is got a bit more rest time for them, as well as not as physical. And I think we're going to see more and more players make that move. So, for example, I think Andre Pollard, player, for example, who struggled in injuries, has not had the best time in the last few years, from example, for staying fit. Japan, I think, will be his next destination. And I think it'll be a really good idea for him to make a move over there. I think you'll see players like sort of some of the props at the moment. I think are quite interesting. A lot of those of them haven't actually gone over, but I think we'll see a lot more players. I think Salman Murat, for example, could be moving to Japan in the next few years. I think we'll probably see somebody like Archie Snyman make that move potentially. We could see someone like Evan Lewis. I think will probably make that move in the next sort of 3-4 years. As these players go look to try and earn a bit more money towards sort of latter stages of their career. And I think it's actually a really nice outlet. I personally have no issue with it. I think, initially we were quite skeptical about it, but I do think that it has definitely helped a lot of our players. I mean, look at someone like Jesse Creel, and he's played a lot of minutes for the Box in the last couple of years and looked absolutely tremendous. And he's actually spoken about how the Japanese game has really improved his game, and it's far more technical in terms of your sort of handling. Very different type of rugby. So Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a little bit superficial to say that's going to be the complete secret, but I do think it's a resource we need to look at trying to use, especially because we also want to try and build our squad. So that's not to say now we should be shipping all our best players to Japan. But at the end of the day, some of these players who are on massive wages, for example, in South Africa, as they get older, as they get to the senior parts of their career, and I'm talking like 32, 33, 34, I'm not talking about leaving at 28, 29 necessarily. It could be an option where these players can go over to Japan. They pay a lot of the salary. It reduces sort of the wage gap down in South Africa, and we can then pay some of our younger players a bit more and keep more players rather than having to invest in one singular player and losing a lot of other players as a result. Obviously, long term, we kind of want our players playing in South Africa. We want the global calendar to be aligned. But I think given the fact that the global calendar is so far away, it is a really, really good resource where players can get the money ticked without having to go to a top 14 where they're going to get played into the ground. The Premiership where they're going to get played into the ground. The Japanese clubs are also very, very understanding in terms of releasing players for internationals that happen outside the window. We've seen it happen before. Often we, for example, have played England outside the international window with only South African and the Japanese players available because the top 14 and Premiership clubs will not release their players for matches outside the window. Even other URC, non-South African sides, your Munsters, your Leinsters, they don't release the South African players outside of the window. So we've got a very good relationship with the Japanese Rugby Union, and I think it's something we should really, really use. We're seeing more players, for example, take sabbaticals going over to Japan, so that's also a massive, massive part of it. So somebody like, I don't know, let's say an Evan Lewis, for example, up and coming star, is slightly sort of staggered, but or Sash Famigomazulu. Let's actually use Sash Famigomazulu as a really good example. Very young player. He won't be looking to leave South Africa in the next couple of years. However, he'll be sitting there at one stage, hopefully, as one of the best players in the world, and you're going, well, how do they keep him in South Africa? A sabbatical. Like, for example, Kirkley Orange is currently on. He's going over to Japan. I think he's there for 2 seasons, and the idea is that he comes back to the Bulls, although I think he actually wants to stay in Japan from the sounds of it. But that's the same thing, even if it's a season sabbatical, we've seen Mapimpi take a sabbatical. We've seen Nakanya take a sabbatical. And basically, these players can go to Japan, new experience, earn some money, and we still get to keep them within the South African setup. So the big thing is that it's a global game. We moved away from it being a South Africa and the rest of the world. It's a global game, and you've got to try and leverage the different leagues, for example, the different opportunities to try and create the best possible environment for South African rugby to succeed. And that means embracing leagues like a Japan, for example, which I think I'd far rather see a player moving to Japan if they're already on a Springboks setup, then move to top 14 and a Premiership. I do think that players who are not on the box setup, I think when they go to Japan, they potentially get forgotten about. So that's why I'm saying I'm not talking about you young players who are not really sort of settled in that box squad. Once they kind of become core members, then I think the Japan option becomes a very good one for them. Let me know what you think. Are you a fan or not so much? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. And we'll see you guys on Wednesday for the Rassie report, the Erasmus equation. And basically, we talk about exactly what Rassie's having to think about and, what is his sort of current conundrum. And we kind of do a new one every single week. So keep an eye for that on Wednesday. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve, and I'll chat to you soon.